Joining us now, Matt Mowers. Matt, the former executive director of the New Hampshire Republican Party, also former White House advisor, chief advisor, and he's with us now. Matt, great to have you.
John, thanks for having me.
Also, Matt was a big part of the Trump 2016 campaign. So, Matt, just get a little to what you're going to be doing going forward in 2020. What's the primary thing, Matt, in 2020 you're going to be working on?
Well, I think the primary thing for all of us is ensuring that the president gets reelected. Can you imagine if we wake up the day after Election Day and for some reason the president is not successful? And,
right.
Michigan and Wisconsin and New Hampshire are all close losses and stuff, close wins. I mean, that's not a world I want to live in. I don't think it's one you or your listeners want to live in either. So I like to say, let's keep the first things first. I think it's making sure the president gets reelected in 2020.
Okay, let's go to. I want to. You're in New England, and you were with us. By the way, thanks for being on last week in New Hampshire at the Red Arrow Diner. I really enjoyed our segment together. You were very informative and a lot of fun and very lively in the morning. Matt, let's get to Maine, right? Nobody really talks about Maine. It's not really on the president's radar screen other than the one district. So I want to talk about Maine, the one district where the president campaigned. He did a rally last year because they're one of the only states where
that's right.
They divvy up the electoral votes by congressional district. Did they change that law, or is it still there?
Yeah, it's still there. So you've got Maine and Nebraska are the only two states in the country that actually break up their electoral votes by congressional district. And if you actually look, Maine is on the map for the president. Here's why. So he ended up winning that second congressional district. I remember going up to Bangor, Maine, and Auburn, Lewiston, and the president kept going up there for a rally every couple weeks to ensure we won that one electoral vote. Polling had showed it being a 2-point race. Ended up winning it by over 10. He won it by so much, they actually almost won the entire state of Maine. He came within 3 points of winning the entire state of Maine. So I would expect you're going to see a real effort from the Trump campaign on trying to win the entire state. So they can pick up a few more electoral votes there if they win the whole state. And so I think you're going to see a lot of emphasis there. And now what they have changed. So Maine also had ranked, has now had ranked order of ballot. So instead of going in there and one person, one vote, the way, I think it works in just about every election everywhere, in Maine, you go and you vote for your second choice as well. And then they tabulate everything based on first and second choices. So that's really messed up a lot of Maine politics. It's the reason why Bruce Poliquin, the former congressman from that second congressional district, Republican, did not win last year. And he was actually going after the constitutionality of that ranked ballot order law.
So basically, you vote for two people. Well, how about if there's only two people on the ballot?
Yeah, you keep voting down. So if there's ultimate, if you've got a third choice, you vote for a third choice and everything else. And then what they do is they tabulate it. And unless someone has over 50% from first choices, they then tabulate second choices. So you can be winning with 49%, and your opponent can have 45%, and yet you can still end up losing that election at 49% once they retabulate all the second choice finishes. So it's not one person,
crazy.
One vote anymore. It's one person, 12 votes. That has a bit of a different meaning in some other states, including New Hampshire.
Right.
But in Maine, it's because you do ranked order voting.
Now, do they do that on the presidential ballot as well?
So they have not in the past. And so I think the real question is going to be the constitutionality of it in Maine, and then to see what happens next year. So it's something where everyone's watching to see how the courts react, as well as seeing how it's ultimately defined for the presidential election.
All right, Matt, excellent. I didn't know that. See, you're a wealth of information. We're with Matt Mowers, former senior chief advisor to the Trump campaign, also former executive director of the New Hampshire Republican Party, where there actually is a Republican Party in New Hampshire. We have a postal permit and a beeper. Let me just ask you something, Matt. Let's stay with Maine. a report out today in the D.C. media that the Democrats are targeting Susan Collins. Now, I'm a Susan Collins fan. I know a lot of things she does drive people bananas. But here's why I'm a Susan Collins fan, right? Any big thing we've ever needed, Susan Collins is there. I thought she made one of the greatest speeches in the well when she defended Judge Kavanaugh. I remember watching it, taping it, watching it again, and I really thought she put him over the top when she came out. And the way she did it with, guns blazing.
Masterful. Yeah.
And I like her. I mean, I know she's a moderate. Sometimes she'll drive us bananas, but she represents a moderate state. But that speech was one of the best speeches I've ever heard in the well, and very riveting. Can she win again, or are they going to take her out?
Yeah, look, they're going to do everything they can to try to take her out. I mean, you have an angry mob out there on the left wing of the Democratic Party right now who are intent on trying to punish any Republican who actually did their constitutional job in voting for Brett Kavanaugh. And so you're going to see the left wing throw everything they can at Susan Collins. But I think you're exactly right, John. She was there when the president and when our party needed her. There were few people who forcefully spoke as well as she did to support Judge Kavanaugh. And so, the Democratic Party, the elite of the swamp have handpicked a candidate in Maine named Sarah Gideon. She's the Speaker of the House, former Speaker of the House there in Maine. She's the handpicked D.C. establishment candidate. And you've got a bit of a rift even in the Democratic Party up there about whether, this Sarah Gideon is who they want when they know she's going to be controlled by a bunch of D.C. insiders. You contrast that with Susan Collins. Susan Collins is really made for a state like Maine. She represents it well. She's there all the time. People just truly have a connection to her. And so I think she's going to be successful. But it's really going to be important for all of us to remember all those moments she was there for the Trump presidency. And that's, supporting, great Supreme Court justices, that's supporting tax reform. There's going to be there have been times when she, brings up concerns that she hears from people of Maine. But when it comes down to it, Susan Collins is a real force of nature in the U.S. Senate, and it's been a real advocate for a lot of our principles.
Well, if you look at the two biggest initiatives of the Trump administration in the first 20, 30 months here, right? 20, 30 months. Judge Neil Gorsuch, she was 100% behind that. Judge Brett Kavanaugh, she delivered, as we just talked about, one of the greatest speeches I thought ever. I mean, she didn't just back him half-ass. I mean, she went all in. And then contrast that by Murkowski's, no show vote or something. I was ridiculous. So I was proud of her for that. And, she was also one of the biggest advocates on the president's tax cut package, which, really was not an easy thing to do either. And she was there front and center. So a lot of good things about her. We wish her the best. Okay, let's get to New Hampshire. I'm convinced Corey Lewandowski is going to run for U.S. Senate. There's no one that's been more dialed into New Hampshire Republican politics than Matt Mowers. Matt, are you going to back Corey Lewandowski for his bid for Senate if he gets in the race?
Well, look, we got to see whether Corey's going to run, right? And I think you heard the president say the same thing last Thursday. I mean, Corey's a friend. I think if he decides to run, he's clearly a strong candidate. But, these are not easy decisions. What the Democratic Party and the Shaheen slime machine and everything else are going to try to do to anyone who steps forward and tries to put themselves out there on the line. And remember, it's not just you. It's your professional background. It's your family that all are part of that campaign. So these are big decisions. They're not ones you make lightly. I think it makes sense that Corey's going to take a little time to make sure, his family is all in. Because you can't, the candidates I see that are the least happy on the campaign trails are the ones whose families are not bought in on them running. So I think he's right to, do his due diligence before getting in. But look, if he decides to go in, I think he's going to be a strong candidate.
You think he's going to win the nomination?
I think he's got a real chance. I mean, it's not going to be a clear primary field. And you do have other good candidates in the race already as well. Some supporters of the president. I expect he'd be really strong in the primary and strong in the general election. But I think it is going to be competitive. So, we'll kind of see where all the chips lay once he makes up his mind.
Well, he's given October as a time frame, and he's laid down the gauntlet and said, if you're a serious candidate, you ought to be able to raise $2 million by the end of the third quarter for your campaign. He said if you raise $600,000, that's good for a county commissioner's race, but not good for going against Gene Shaheen. So I kind of agree with him, but there's only two announced candidates. I mean, there's a third one that nobody's heard of. There's only two legit candidates so far in the race. Bill O'Brien, Speaker of the House, we talked about this. Number one, I think if Corey gets in, I know they're friends. I think O'Brien gets out. If he doesn't, what's going to come up is all of the comments that O'Brien made as a never Trumper. They're all out there. He's not going to be the nominee if Lewandowski's in the race, right? So whether he gets,
I don't think
Bill
O'Brien's going to be the nominee, no matter how the field shakes out. What. I mean, I don't think you can be as vocally opposed to President Trump in 2016 the way Bill O'Brien was, and then be the standard bearer for the Republican Party in a state like New Hampshire. You just can't do it. You throw in the fact. I mean, look, I like Bill, right? I like Bill. I know Bill pretty well, but he's got, he had donated to John Kerry and Al Gore in his past. He didn't support the president in 2016. That does not sound like a statewide Republican success story to me.
Yeah, and when you look at some of the comments he made that people have shared with me, Matt, and I know being from New Hampshire and running the Republican Party there, some of the things he said, they're things you just can't take back, and they're very nasty. And so I really don't see any – I agree with you. I see no scenario where Bill O'Brien's a nominee of U.S. Senate from New Hampshire. So that leaves Brigadier General Don Bulldog, and the problem is, as Lewandowski said on my show on Friday, I believe, and he's coming up at 8 a.m., if Don can't raise, if the general can't raise $2 million by the end of the third quarter, he's just not viable. I think he's going to raise 500 or 600, and I think at the end of October, Lewandowski gets in the race, and he'll raise a ton of money, and I think he'll be the favorite. When I had him on my show Friday, he certainly sounded to me like a candidate for U.S. Senate. So I do believe, Matty, he's going to run.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, and look, no doubt money is important. The only thing I'll say is in a state like New Hampshire, I've got two words for you on money: Jeb Bush. He and his super PAC had $150 million to spend. It's so much money that they didn't know what to do with. I mean, look, the dynamics of New Hampshire politics is that the media markets are expensive. You're in the Boston media market. That's expensive. It takes up the bulk of the state of New Hampshire. But outside of that, it's a pretty affordable state to run a campaign in. You don't need a ton of votes to win. Retail politics still matters. I don't think money is everything, but money's certainly important.
Matt Mowers, make your prediction. Who's going to be the Republican Senate nominee from New Hampshire?
I'm not in the prediction game today. Let's see what the field looks like in October, and then we'll chat about it, John. I'm not trying to hedge, but
that's okay.
I think we got to see who runs.
I only ask people for predictions whose judgment and insight I hold in high regard. So take it as a great compliment. I'll make my prediction now. Lewandowski is going to run. Lewandowski is going to be the nominee. Corey Lewandowski is going to be the next senator from New Hampshire. If Trump wins New Hampshire, Lewandowski is U.S. Senator. Speaking of that, you can make this prediction. Is Trump going to win New Hampshire 2020? Yes or no?
Yes, because he's going to beat Elizabeth Warren, who I think will be the Democrat nominee.
Oh, so you think Warren's going to be the nominee?
I think there's a chance.
Okay, interesting.
She's got.
Matt
I don't know,
Mowers?
John. I just got back, from New Hampshire. I was up there for a week, the way you were, and talking to a lot of Democrats. I think there's a lot of enthusiasm for her. I think, Joe Biden. I mean, let's let's see what happens with Joe Biden in the next few months. His campaign's like trying to saran wrap him now. Make sure no one touches him too much, gets too close. You can't run saran wrap candidates in New Hampshire and succeed. So I don't think that's going to work out.
Joe Biden, the saran wrap candidate, or like Man from Glad. I still think it's going to be Bernie Sanders. So we're not on the same page on that one. But if Sanders beats Warren, here's the problem. If Sanders beats Warren in New Hampshire, her candidacy ends the next day. She can't recover from that.
That's right.
And he's going to beat her in New Hampshire. Bernie Brigade is going to beat her. Bernie Bros, right? Bernie Bros. All right, man. I got to roll.